It was the kind of remark that could obliterate a career. A single sentence, uttered in the heat of a live debate, and the world would never look at Elliot Graves the same way again. By dawn, his name would dominate headlines, not for his incisive wit or fearless commentary, but for the scandal that would come to define his downfall. The question on everyone's lips: had he crossed an unforgivable line, or had he been pushed into it? And more importantly, could he survive the fallout? The stage was set for what should have been a routine debate, the kind of polished, high-stakes performance that had become second nature to Elliot Graves. The topic, corporate influence in politics, was a well-worn subject, guaranteed to stir controversy and draw viewers. But tonight felt different, charged with an almost tangible electricity, as though the air itself was holding its breath. The studio lights burned brighter than usual, their harsh glare reflecting off the polished wooden desk where Elliot sat, his salt-and-pepper hair catching the light like a silver crown. To his left sat Brian Colton, a polished political strategist whose perfectly tailored suit and calm, measured demeanor stood in stark contrast to Elliot's disheveled intensity. To his right was Madison Rourke, a conservative firebrand with a reputation for never backing down, her sharp eyes and crossed arms telegraphing her readiness for combat. The tension in the room was palpable, the kind of quiet anticipation that precedes a storm. The audience, both in the studio and at home, leaned in, bracing for the verbal fireworks they knew were inevitable, their collective breath held in anticipation of the sparks that would fly. Elliot leaned forward, his piercing gaze locked on Brian, his body language radiating the kind of intensity that had made him a star. "Let's talk about Pam Bondi," he began, his voice dripping with skepticism, each word carefully chosen to cut through the polished veneer of political spin. She spent her career prosecuting the powerless while cozying up to the powerful. Then, out of nowhere, she lands a cushy job with Donald Trump. Tell me, Brian, how is that not the epitome of political favoritism? The question hung in the air, a challenge wrapped in the guise of curiosity, and the audience leaned in, eager to see how Brian would respond. Brian adjusted his tie, his practiced smile never wavering, a master of deflection. "Elliot, you're oversimplifying," he said, his tone smooth and measured, the kind of voice that could make even the most controversial statement sound reasonable. Bondi was a respected attorney general for 8 years. Her legal expertise speaks for itself. It was a textbook response, designed to shut down the conversation without conceding an inch, but Elliot wasn't about to let it go. Elliot scoffed, his lips curling into a sardonic smirk, the kind of expression that had become his trademark. Respected by whom? Corporate donors? Lobbyists? Let's call it what it is, a quid pro quo. His words were sharp, cutting through the polished rhetoric like a knife, and the audience reacted with a mix of gasps and murmurs, the tension in the room ratcheting up another notch. Madison, who had been simmering quietly, finally interjected, her voice cutting through the tension like a whip. "Oh, come on, Elliot," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. "You love playing the moral arbiter, but let's be real. You pick and choose your villains. Why is it corruption when Bondi does it, but not when your allies do?" Her words were a direct challenge, a gauntlet thrown down, and the audience held its breath. Sensing that the debate was about to take a turn no one saw coming, Elliot smirked, his trademark confidence on full display, the kind of bravado that had made him a star but also made him dangerous. "Pam Bondi, please," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "She's been selling herself to the highest bidder for years." The words hung in the air like a guillotine, slicing through the tension and leaving a stunned silence in their wake. Even Elliot, who prided himself on never flinching, seemed to realize he had crossed an invisible line, his smirk faltering for the briefest of moments before he regained his composure. Madison's face tightened, her lips pressing into a thin, disapproving line, her eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Excuse me?" she said, her voice icy, each word sharp enough to cut glass. Did you just say what I think you said? The room seemed to hold its breath. The tension, so thick it was almost suffocating, as everyone waited to see how Elliot would respond. Elliot, ever the quick thinker, tried to backtrack, his voice taking on a defensive edge. I'm talking about her career, Madison, he said, his words coming out in a rush. The way she's played the system. The way she's… But before he could finish, Madison cut him off, her tone as sharp as a blade. Stop, she said, her voice cutting through the room like a knife. You implied something disgusting, and you know it. The damage was done, the words hanging in the air like a storm cloud, and the control room erupted into chaos, producers scrambling to figure out how to handle the situation, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of panic. The audience murmured, some gasping, others whispering furiously to their neighbors, the tension in the room reaching a fever pitch. And the internet? The internet exploded, clips of the moment going viral within minutes, the outrage spreading like wildfire. By the time the segment wrapped, clips of Elliot's remark were already viral, spreading across social media like a virus. Twitter became a battlefield, with conservatives decrying the comment as blatant misogyny, their outrage amplified by hashtags like Fire Elliot Graves and Cancel Culture Wins. Liberals, meanwhile, argued that it was a fair critique of Bondi's career. But their defenses were drowned out by the louder, angrier voices. The network's executives, however, weren't interested in nuance. By morning, Elliot was out of a job, his career in ruins, his name synonymous with scandal. Elliot Graves had always thrived in controversy, his career built on pushing boundaries and riding the wave of outrage. He knew the game. Say something. Provocative. Watch the ratings climb and let the controversy burn itself out. But this time was different. The network didn't just fire him. They erased him, scrubbing his presence from their website and social media channels as though he had never existed. Anonymous sources painted him as volatile, difficult, and reckless, their stories carefully crafted to construct a narrative of a man who had always been a liability. Old clips and tweets were dredged up, their context stripped away to fit the new narrative, and headlines screamed, "Primetime anchor crosses the line," and "Network silent as controversy grows." But Elliot wasn't one to go quietly. Within days, he launched his own independent channel, free from the constraints of corporate oversight, his first video raw and unfiltered. "They think this is over," he said, staring straight into the camera, his eyes burning with defiance. "They're wrong." The video was a rallying cry, a declaration of war, and it struck a chord with millions of viewers who felt silenced by the mainstream media. Within hours, the video had gone viral, and Elliot became a symbol of resistance, a rallying cry for those who believed in free speech and the power of dissent. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Millions flocked to his channel, drawn by his unapologetic defiance and his willingness to speak truth to power. He became a symbol of resistance, a rallying cry for those who felt silenced by the mainstream media, his story resonating with anyone who had ever felt the sting of injustice or the weight of censorship. But with every new subscriber, the pushback grew stronger, the forces arrayed against him doubling down in their efforts to destroy him. The network leaked stories about his alleged misconduct, painting him as a pariah, a man who had brought his downfall upon himself. But Elliot refused to back down, his defiance only growing stronger with each attack, his message resonating with an ever-growing audience. Elliot's latest live stream was different, a departure from the firebrand persona that had made him famous. Gone was the bravado, the swagger, the unshakable confidence. In its place was a man reflecting on the cost of speaking truth to power, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "This isn't just about me," he said, his words measured and deliberate, each one carrying the weight of experience. "It's about anyone who believes in free speech, who decides where the line is, who gets to silence whom." The chat exploded with messages, some praising him as a hero, others calling him a cautionary tale, the debate playing out in real time as Elliot spoke. He leaned forward, his gaze unwavering, his voice filled with quiet determination. "They thought they could end me," he said, his words ringing with conviction. "They didn't. And if you think this fight is over, you're not paying attention." The screen faded to black, leaving viewers with a question that lingered long after the stream ended. Was Elliot Graves a victim of a system that punishes dissent? Or did he bring this on himself? Elliot Graves had lost his job, but he had gained something far more powerful: control over his own narrative. His story was no longer just about a controversial remark or a career in ruins. It was about the battle for free speech in an era where every word could be weaponized, where the line between truth and outrage was increasingly blurred. He had become a symbol, a rallying cry for those who believed in the power of dissent, his story resonating with anyone who had ever felt the sting of injustice or the weight of censorship. And as he looked out at the world from behind the camera, his gaze steady and unwavering, he knew that this was just the beginning. The fight was far from over, and Elliot Graves was ready to lead the charge. So what do you think? Did Elliot go too far, or was he a casualty of a system that doesn't tolerate dissent? Let me know in the comments. And if you believe in hearing every side of the story, hit that subscribe button. Because this isn't the end, it's just the beginning.